Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Planning and Development Committee for Thursday, February 17th, 2022. I'd like to call this meeting to order and acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is located on the territory of the Seashelt and Squamish First Nations. As we get going here, we do have an agenda in front of us today that is not amended. Does anybody have anything they would like to add or change or delete? If not, I look for a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. May I also have a motion to receive all reports and minutes today? Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Thank you very much. All right. Our first delegation is Jerry Pedro from the Sunshine Coast Community Solar Association. So I will promote Jerry. Good morning.
Hello. Okay, so I have some slides if that would be acceptable.
Yep, you should be able to share your screen with us.
Okay. Okay, great. So this is a follow-up to last year's presentation when we came on. Everybody see my slide okay?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. Basically, we approached the SCRD with the idea of doing, with a student intern, audit, basically energy conservation audit, and also solar audit of as many buildings as we could get to with the student in the summer that during the 12 weeks we had him. So we did do that. So in 2021, okay, so this is who we are, of course. We're up to 75 members and 545 people who are active with our newsletter, who indicated they want to hear what's going on with solar. Last year, our big project was raising money for and getting a solar system installed for the SPCA. And the one that's there now just about supplies all of their energy. So it's going to be saving them about $2,600 a year on their bills. And we have a phase 2 happening this year where we have raised further money and we will be putting in solar hot water and also replacing their gas heat with heat pump. So they'll be essentially greenhouse gas free. So that'll be what we're doing this year. Last year, we got a great grant from the Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions that allowed us to hire a student, and we also got a grant and aid from the SCRD that let us buy hardware and software for doing the solar assessments. So we hired a UVic student and trained him and mentored him. It was a really good experience. And as a result of that, we were able to audit 16 buildings throughout the summer. And we submitted detailed reports. All of the ones that had any chance at all of being useful for solar. We did a solar evaluation, shade evaluation, insulation, and so on, and also investigation of the roof to make sure that the site was suitable. And then we also did the full energy report for several of the buildings. And in that report, we looked at things like lighting, heating, domestic hot water, and any other things that we collect, the building envelope, windows, etc. And made energy conservation measure suggestions. And in the course of the summer, we came up with about 80 suggestions and 80 energy conservation measures. And of those, we were able to do evaluations to estimate how much the saving would be, either in operating cost or in greenhouse gas. Those were the two things that RAF wanted us to look at. And so we ended up with that list of 80 and costed out the capital cost with a plus or minus 30% estimate. So basically enough to properly rank which things have the best payback. So of those 80, we did 30% capital cost estimates, and 40 of the projects, so there were 10 more than that, where we figured out how much it could save, but we had not gotten around to calculating the cost of doing the project. So what we're hoping to do this year is hire 2 students instead of 1 and continue the process, because there's still some buildings we haven't done, like the transit maintenance building and so on, that look like they have good opportunities. And we'd also like to finish off the other 40 to give you a rough 30% and also estimate the savings. So that's basically what we'd like to do, is complete the audit process. And then your staff can look at that, and having the order of magnitude, you can say, okay, now it's worth doing the following 5 or 10 projects. Or even better, these are really, really cheap. Let's just go ahead and do them this year with maintenance budgets. But at least you can go through and say, here's where the top hitters are. So if we do manage to get 2 students, we also hope to extend our offer to the Seashelt Indian Band, to the Seashelt Municipality, and also to Gibson's. But you guys are first, so we'd like to finish this, and it's not a big deal, but that's what we're aiming for. So once this is done, of course, your staff will know what the priority is and where you get the biggest bang for your buck. So this is what it looks like. These are all the ones we did for the solar. So basically, we looked at these buildings and said, okay, here are how many panels we can put on the building. So what fits, at least looking south. How many kilowatts you'd have on the system, what the shading is like. So like Roberts Creek Fire Hall, it sees sun, but doesn't get very much, so it doesn't do very well. So we showed how much you can get from the sun. So like the Parks Quonset hut, you could get 126%. So if you put 24 panels on, that would eliminate your BC hydro bill there. And then we ranked them in terms of payback. So we estimated the install cost and the annual savings. And so here's your rank. So if you want to do anything in solar, starting there is your best bet. You get the best payback. And by the time you get down to these areas, these are the big buildings that you can put lots of panels on, but unfortunately they pay the large general service rate, which is only 6 cents a kilowatt. So you don't get very good paybacks. So at the moment, the way BC Hydro does their net metering program, it's basically not suitable. Okay, and then for the other things where we looked at it for either a cost saving or a greenhouse gas saving, like I say, there are 80 of these, and I have just taken the Roberts Creek Fire Hall and the Half Moon Bay Fire Hall as an example. So Roberts Creek, there were 7 things that were identified that could save energy, and the key things here is how much greenhouse gas you would save with each of those energy conservation measures and the payback. So their lighting, they've got a whole bunch of stuff. They still even have incandescent bulbs. So there's a payback of 1 year for that. And of course, if you get a BC Hydro grant for any of this stuff, it becomes months. programmable thermostat, weather stripping, insulating a door. So those are the easy ones. And then of course these are much longer. So, you know, single glazed window, it happened to be in a place that's not heated it's not heated to 70 degrees, so you don't get much savings. So that's the kind of thing. And Half Moon Bay, I highlighted it because they have a propane furnace. So in that case, we look at, here's how much propane is used. That's how much you can save in terms of greenhouse gases. But of course, you replace it with a heat pump, so you increase the greenhouse gases. But net, that's 5,000 kilograms. That's 5 tons of CO2 that you can save a year on that one building. Plus, it's got a great saving. It's got a 5-year payback. So propane is a lot more expensive than operating a heat pump. So this is the example of the kind of thing we've done for all of those 16 buildings. So our next steps, we've applied for grants. I don't know if we'll get the students, but if we even get one, you guys would be what we'd like to finish with, assuming you're still interested. And we had an electrical engineer last year, so that was great for the solar and checking out power systems. But we realized that we needed somebody like a chemical engineer who has thermodynamics, and then we could take some really close look at things like the hockey rinks and the rec centers, the pools and so on, because there's tremendous opportunities there to save energy using heat pumps and heat exchangers. And somebody with thermodynamics would be good to dig, roll up their sleeves and get into there and get a proper estimate of what the savings are and what kind of a project would be able to do it. So basically, if you're interested, we'd love a letter of support from you to say you'd like to complete the process, and we'll include that with our grant applications, and that'll possibly help us get the students we're looking for. And if we do get both students, then we'll have time to do other areas on the coast as well. So that's where we're at, and I'd love to throw it open to questions now.
All right, thank you very much. If I can get you to end your screen share.
Yes.
Thank you. Directors, any questions? Director McMahon.
Right, just getting used to being back here in person again. So thank you so much, Mr. Pedro. That was a really great project. It was interesting for me to read, just because it also gives me some ideas, for where the energy savings might be in my own home or other buildings. So I think this is a great project, and I'm up with a letter of support for the Solar Association. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Director McMahon. Director Ties.
Yeah, I'd like to echo all of Director McMahon's remarks. So yes, thank you for doing that. Thank you for all the initiative that you've taken, and thank you to Manager Shea for supporting all of that. So yeah, also be happy to support that. Sure, I'll move the creation of a letter of support. I'm sure staff can figure out the details of what should be in it.
And I did see Director McMahon seconded that. So any other comments or questions from directors? Seeing none. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Anything else for our delegation? Director Hiltz.
Has the board seen the documentation of these reports yet? What Gary presented is preliminary, so are we going to be getting some kind of a report about this? So I'm just wondering about the timing on when we get the details of, the project isn't completed, it's in progress, so when does kind of the public get to see what's been done so far? Thanks.
Great question. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I have sent all of the solar reports, so RAF has all of those, and I've also submitted, think we're up to 8 of the 16 where I've got a complete report for the ECMs. And then the other ones, they're in draft mode, and Ref may have seen some of the drafts. I sent him everything that we had completed so far, but they have not officially been released.
Okay, thank you. I think as sort of a follow-up, do we have an expected timeline on when we might see the results come out to us? And I don't know who can speak to that, if anybody.
Well, I can finish off some of the little ones, like, Pastor House, and there was one for the park at Cliff Gilker. There's things like that I could finish off myself, but the big ones, basically the 5 big buildings, the rinks, the pools, that includes Pender Harbor Pool. That would not happen until and if we got a student to do it, because they're very big reports, and I realized that we bit off more than we could chew to try to do those big ones, simply because they're so complex. And like I said, we had an electrical engineer, and he just wasn't up to doing that kind of stuff. I'm a chemical engineer, I could do it, but I had just retired and had other things on my plate last summer. This summer, I intend to get somebody who's suitable for that and spend a lot more time mentoring them.
All right, GM Hall.
Thanks, Chair. Just to add that staff hear the interest and think that there's a learning opportunity for people who have other buildings kind of like these ones to benefit from the work done through this partnership. So staff will work with Jerry's team to get information posted on our website. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands up or anybody wanting to ask questions, so I think we will send you on your way. Thank you very much, Jerry, for coming today.
Okay, great. And can I just say that for the further buildings, part of last summer was spent developing our tools. So developing Excel sheets and report formats and so on, and also learning how to use the solar equipment and software. That actually consumed over a month of the students' time before we even got started. So that is all under future buildings will be much faster. Probably, do a building a week kind of thing from the time of we audit it to having a report.
Great. I look forward to it. I'm an electrician by trade, and I'm fascinated by the energy savings and all of the efficiencies that we can gain. So thank you very much, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
All right, next up we have the Elfenstone Community Association, and I'm just bringing the 2 members that are on our agenda in as panelists. Good morning, Herman and Colleen.
Good morning.
I think you're, take it away.
Okay, so I guess I should start sharing the screen. I'm reasonably new at it, usually screw up a bit. I want my PowerPoint here, and I share this. Yes, so far, so good.
So far, so good.
Yeah, okay, I think we're on then. Okay, so this is actually the 3rd time in 4 years we're talking about this, and I very much hope that we all manage to move this a step ahead, and that's our request to conserve Reed Road Forest and remove it from BC Timber Sales Management. So many of you will have heard about the forest in many ways. I just highlight some things about the forest. So it's a 120-acre parcel. It's just at the bottom of the lower slopes of Mount Elfenstone. It's a really spectacular forest that has regenerated naturally after a big fire, offers tremendous biodiversity. It is part of the Aquifer 560, so the Elfenstone or Gibson's Aquifer, and it was designated a watershed reserve in the 1940s to preserve the water quality. And we all remember the stage 4 water emergencies. So this really highlights how important it is to protect watershed recharge areas, which this forest is. Another issue that we have, and with that severe now, more severe with climate change, is washout floodings. So Whitaker Creek is a prime example that's running just west of Reed Road Forest. Shirley Creek actually comes, it's a reasonably small creek, runs through the eastern end of Reed Road Forest, and it managed to wash out Russell Road twice already in 2014 and 2018. So it's really essential that we maintain our healthy forest ecosystem and we reduce downstream flooding as well as really protect our aquifers. The other thing that's special about Reed Road Forest is it is at the urban forest interface. So this really makes it a unique forest, and that alone should actually keep BC timber sales away. It's been popular as recreation for ever since we moved here over 10 years ago. And with COVID, we've seen quite a strong increase of people using this forest to really highlighting the forest it has to our community. Just on the location, so you're on, oh yeah, here my mouse moving. So the lot sits right on top of the aquifer at the foot of Elfenstone, Mount Elfenstone. And it's estimated that over half of all the water in the aquifer is actually coming down from Mount Elfenstone. And it moves pretty fast, actually, in the aquifer, about 400 meters a year. So in 9 years, water from this area here will be down at the wellhead in Gibson's or at Church Road. The second thing is stormwater. So I'll just show you 3 pictures that we've taken last October, November. Shirley Creek, just as it exits Reed Road Forest on Reed Road. Shirley Creek at Russell Road. So here actually gets joined by another creek that's coming from the middle of Reed Road Forest, and then down at the Chester House. So we had 2 atmospheric rivers that really were bringing the creeks right up. So this is Shirley Creek at Reed Road, and the culvert here that has been replaced 4 or 5 years ago, it's absolute capacity. And that happened in October, that happened 30 days later again in November. This here is Shirley Creek at Russell Road that washed out twice. Again, there are 2 big culverts in it. They're at capacity. So one big tree that comes down or something, and we have another washout. And many of you will have probably seen this here, Chester House. It's in dire trouble, and I thank Donna McMahon for this picture here. The point I want to make is this is happening with intact forests above, so Reed Road Forest, and of course all the trees and higher up as well. So we're in trouble as is. Let's not make it worse. Historically, the Reed Road Forest has been outside the BC timber sales area. So this is from a BCTS map from 2010, and the boundary is here. And this was because it was labeled a watershed area, so they drew the boundary here. But I think most people didn't realize that I think it was the Gordon Campbell government quietly abolished the watershed reserve as a protection for forest. And suddenly this got incorporated by BC Timber Sales into their management area. And that happened in 2013. And this was done without any consultation with local government Of course, residents were not talked about it either. I'm quite sure neither did the Squamish Nation hear about it. We only became aware once we discovered marking tapes in the forest that there's something happening here. More recently, BCTS has incorporated this forest into a so-called area of enhanced public engagement, whatever that may mean. And the question that I simply have is, why didn't they engage the people before they incorporated the forest? That would have saved a lot of anxiety, headache, stress, and actually work for all of us, including BCTS. Of course, there has been strong opposition to this as soon as these plans became known. And actually, even before BCTS grabbed the forest, so the Community Association has argued that this should be turned into a park or conservation area in 208 here. What would you like to do with the forest? So basically preserve it as a conservation area, as a teaching forest. Just maintain the forest as is. Don't do much to it. There's not much that needs to be done. Develop the existing trails a bit better and use it as an educational and a recreational forest. And this could be done with our association as an umbrella organization in cooperation with First Nations, environmental recreational groups, as well as educational groups. So this message I have actually for the SCRD councillors is that extreme weather events threaten our environment. And as I just pointed out, we have flooding, we have droughts, and so on. And at the local level, there's very little we can do to change this from happening. We're really delighted to see the solar effort that goes on, and that's these things that need to be done. But overall, it is big government that has to do big changes to get the climate under control. And we have very little power to mitigate the impact of climate change, except if you're in local government or in government, you have some power to do something. And that is protect the forest in sensitive watersheds especially, because that's what we need for our future, even more for the water supply, protect us from flooding and so on. So this is for you councillors. So we ask specifically that the SCRD urgently make a formal application to the Squamish First Nation and the province for a sponsor crown grant that covers District Block 1313. And finally, the members of our community association would be happy to work with and assist SCRD staff putting this application together for this crown grant, should they so wish. So we're happy to really help. We're very serious about it. So I'll thank you for your attention. Okay, so I think I should now go back with my screen sharing. And this is usually where I screw up. Stop share. Oh, it's on top now. Okay, I got it.
All right. Thank you very much for your presentation. Directors, any questions, comments? Director McMahon, this is your area.
Well, you know that I'm going to blither, so I was just wanting if anybody else would like to get in there first before I start pontificating.
No, pontificate away.
Oh, all right, pontificate away. Well, I prepared a few words.
Oh, maybe not.
All right. Doing nothing is not an option at this time. We've been doing nothing since 2013, and it's not getting the results that we want. So now we really do have to take action. In a number of letters we've received, BC Timber Sales stated that they have delayed harvesting of the cut block repeatedly to, quote, provide the SCRD with time to pursue a change in land use status, unquote. It wasn't until recently that I finally realized that from their point of view, all of our staff reports, letters, demonstrations, and meetings with the minister and our MLA are not any action that they recognize. The only thing that counts from their point of view is when we file an application through Front Counter BC. So we're in this situation because 20 years ago, the provincial government wiped out protection for community watershed reserves, leaving us to try and find workarounds to protect the aquifers that we are increasingly relying on for our drinking water supply. As pointed out by staff in the report, the legislation we are trying to work with was not written to deal with the real and urgent challenges we face, so we're trying to adapt tools that weren't designed for the job. In the long run, this is a stopgap measure. So what we're looking for right now is the best stopgap measure until we can get the appropriate water sustainability tools to protect our watersheds and our aquifer recharge areas and to manage stormwater. This has become a province-wide issue in the last year, and I'm hoping that we will be able to make progress over the next few years. I also wanted to point out, as Herman mentioned, that the location and nature of this forest makes it a unique opportunity to bring partners together to pursue research, education, collaboration, and reconciliation. In my view, the best options would be a sponsored Crown grant or maybe a reserve under the Land Act. And I just wanted to add, I'm skipping some exciting stuff, but it's all right. You're not missing too much. That the wording for conservation purposes is accurate, but it's narrow, and it doesn't speak to the urgent challenges we're facing in a climate emergency. In the staff report, it says under sponsored Crown grants that the land must provide valuable community service. Well, you know, aquifer and stormwater protection are important services. Recreation, perhaps, also. So, that was my my pontification.
Thank you for that. Any other directors want to weigh in, questions or comments? Director Kroll.
Thank you, and thank you for the, we had the benefit of this presentation to Gibson's Council some time ago, and I'm certainly in support of it. It directly impacts us with respect to watershed and the Gibson's aquifer, as we refer to it, although water is something that we need to share. So, you know, as Donna said, it's something we need to work together on to move forward. And you know, it's really frustrating in meetings we've had with various ministers. They all sort of point in opposite directions. It's not my problem. You know, you have to do this. So I think between, you know, the town of Gibsons, the district of Sechelt, the First Nations, and the RD, you know, Team Sunshine Coast really needs to pull out all the stops here and do everything we can to get some traction.
Thank you, Director Kroll. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and thanks, Herman. Good presentation, nicely packaged up, and you've done your homework. So that's kind of what I'm asking is, in doing your homework, have you found other communities? I'm guessing that the Sunshine Coast is not unique in this situation. Have you seen other communities in BC that have gone through this process of dealing with provincial lands and in the urban interface? So what's your experience? Thanks.
No, actually, I have not. That was just too much focus here. You know, this is, you know, in a way I got thrown into this. Of course, we're just living next to the forest. We sort of bought here actually because it was labeled a watershed reserve. So we thought, okay, this is just a really decent environment, and we're sort of basically learning as we move along. And each and every turn you take, there is a new surprise. You know, and I didn't realize how much red tape there is, how complicated things is. And I have to admit that my estimation for your work has increased significantly, being here and realizing it's not as easy as you think as a private citizen to do things and deal with our government. So, you know, the feedback I give to people ask me, I say, you have to be patient. There are processes here and so on. But I'm quite sure, we're not the only people. There must be, I think, Westhouse Sound and so on. There are other aquifers and so on as well. And you have a Ministry of Forests that basically just sees trees and nothing else that they want to cut down. We could go on for hours here, but, so, but I think it's an overall strategy to protect watershed areas, but you all know that better than I do. So,
All right, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands up from my other directors. Director Pratt, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Toth, and thank you, Herman, for your presentation. And I know we've been spoken with you before, and thank you for this. And because in recognition that we do have a staff report that's coming up after this, I don't want to pontificate too much, to use the word of the day. But, we are in such a unique position here on coastal BC because of the aquifers, but also the topography of the land is challenging with the steep slopes and when you're taking down those trees that are holding your soil in up at heights and the effect that it has as you get closer down to the water, especially with these atmospheric rivers and as we saw, where one of our facilities essentially had a moat around it for and we're really lucky we didn't lose it, but it's I can understand being a neighbor, Herman, how critical this is just for you and for your neighborhood, but also for the coast as a whole. And as we move forward, especially with the town of Gibsons and the Squamish Nation, I'm looking forward to our team approach in dealing with the province on this. So thank you.
All right, thank you for those comments. Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. I think something that the town of Gibsons has, tapped into and utilized is the value of natural assets for stormwater management and, protection of the environment. And, this is a classic case with the weather events we've seen, recently, how important it is to be able to control the volumes of water that we're dealing with. I would also almost question the ethics of taking a watershed protected area out of that classification and putting profit ahead of people on the planet. So, I think there's, as I said earlier, we really need to pull all the stops on this one.
All right, Director McLean.
Yeah, thank you for that, Director Cole. Has the town of Gibsons done any work around natural assets in this Block 1313? Like, do we have some study, even though it's outside of town boundaries?
Well, we've recognized the importance of this. And, when we had the presentation brought to council, the town is right there with the RD trying to, work to protect this area as a natural asset. It's, it's not, obviously it's not in the town of Gibsons, but it impacts on the town of Gibsons. Floodwaters know no boundaries. So I think it's something that, as I said earlier, that, we really have to pull the stops and get this happening.
Should we release our delegation first? Or is it?
It's not part of the delegation.
Okay. All right, I think we're going to move on to Annex B, which is the actual staff report around this. But before we do, I'm just going to release the Elfenstone Community Association from the meeting. So thank you guys for being here today and for your presentation.
Yep.
And yeah, you're welcome to stick around for the rest of the meeting. I already did. All right. Annex B, pages 2 to 6, District Lot 1313, options for conservation. Over to GM Hall, I guess. Is your name on the report?
Thank you, Chair. if I've done my job well, the report is clear. But one thing I would like to mention that's relevant and also builds on the comments from the delegation is that as part of preparing this, but after publication, I was able to speak with senior staff at the Squamish Nation about this file, and the referral process was discussed as a way to advance dialogue. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Directors, comments, questions? Director Pratt, I saw your hand first.
Thanks. I like using the personal here, being that we're in the same room and don't have to use everything electronic. I mean, this is obviously, I think this is something that this board really supports, or the committee supports, which the board will support, of course. I guess my question is how do we ensure that the town of Gibson's is really key as part of this application going forward? Because it is it's crucial for them, for their aquifer and for their water sourcing as well. So I really would like to see a Team Sunshine Coast approach as hashtag that. And yeah, so that's just, I want to make sure that we've got the town of Gibson's really involved in this as well from the get-go.
Thank you, Director Pratt. I don't know if you want to speak to that, or go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. So at the staff level, I did have positive contact with the town of Gibson's, and there was excellent agreement on sharing resources towards next steps and a shared understanding of the importance of those next steps. If there's to assist or facilitate and formalize that, the committee could consider a motion to the effect that the town of Gibson's be invited to collaborate on whatever the next steps are. And that would give staff the ability to work with the town in a formal way. Thanks.
Okay, follow up, Director Pratt?
Yes, just to go back to the presentation and the comment from Director McLean regarding what work the town of Gibson's has done in the past, if they had keyed this as being a natural asset piece, is I think probably some of the key research in regards to that is the work that the town of Gibson's did around the aquifer recharge area. There's in the last term, and I think some of it was even in the term before that they started a lot of that work. And I think about I think of all of the graphs and the reports I've seen in previous town of Gibson's meetings about that, about the river that goes that starts at Mount Elfenstone, and how many different, I think the key piece is how many different jurisdictions that this piece of, or how many different jurisdictions that aquifer, the water needs to pass through in order to get into your tap. And so that's why it's really key. And I think when we get to the point that we're making a motion on this, I would really like to add the town of Gibson's in as part of the referral process to formalize. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ties, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you. And the one thing that I kind of flagged in the staff report was that there seems that conservation was sort of highlighted as the primary purpose, and I, in my opinion, the primary purpose for this, for conserving this, is watershed and downstream property protection, and not just conservation for conservation's sake. And I think we need to highlight that, and that's I think something that maybe staff should take back and maybe make sure that that's in their wording as part of the primary purpose. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. The question on the staff report that I have is the ability for the Squamish to participate in the referral, and the topic of capacity funding comes up whenever referrals are made to First Nations, in particular Squamish, because of the capacity for them to participate in this. So does staff have any information on that aspect of, can the SCRD do that? Is it an obstacle, I guess is the question, is the capacity of the Squamish to actually respond to the referral? Thanks.
GM Hall?
Thank you, Chair. And the answer is staff don't know. And I'm not sure I'm not sure we have information on which to base an answer so far. Thanks.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Right. I'm just going to mention that informally, I've heard that the Squamish Nation they've set up new referral processes and hired a bunch of staff, so possibly. But, this is new to all of us, this whole process, and we're having to work it out as we go. I had taken the opportunity of drafting a motion, but it doesn't have the Town of Gibson's collaboration piece in there, and I'm not quite sure if that should be separate or in the same vein. Perhaps the Town of Gibson's has something to say about this.
Director Kroll?
Thank you, Director Mann and Chair. The Town of Gibbs, we're all in this together. So, I think people operating in silos independent of one another is going to be totally counterproductive. So, the Church Road well is, which the regional district is going to be very dependent on, is part of the system. So, we're all in the same boat, dare I say. So, it makes no sense for one to move without the other. So, and, from the Town of Gibson's point of view, we have been dealing with ministries bashing our head against the wall. We go back to 2016, we were asking for a drinking water protection. And, the ministry's lost our request. It's been filed 3 times now. So, this is critically important to all of us. And, we can't act alone. Something, if I may add it at this point, now that I've got your undivided attention, is, Director Ties mentioned conservation, but also in dealing with First Nations, we need to consider the reconciliation aspect of things. And the Town of Gibson's has created a healing forest. There's no reason that this also couldn't be included under that same umbrella. And, I think it's a lot better going to, First Nations saying, if we can get the Crown grant, we would like to make this part of the Healing Forest project, because there's a lot of healing that needs to be done.
Thank you, Director Kroll. Before I come back to you, Director McMahon, Director Lee has his hand up, so Director Lee.
It's been a while. Thank you, Chair. It's not in my area, of course, but I'm very interested in the whole process, because it's success at this could help us elsewhere. So I think it's great that we're going to approach it as Team Sunshine Coast. But I think it's further than that, because we need the Squamish Nation with us if we're going to be successful. And so I really do like staff's approach of taking the proposal to them for consultation without a solution along with it, because it shows an openness and a willingness to talk. So I think that's important. The other thing I would like to comment on is that staff is recommending a nominal rent tenure approach. And I hadn't heard that one before. And now that I read the report, it actually seems like it is a viable option as well to put on the table for if someone says, hey, what can we do? Then we got that option as well now. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lee. Director McMahon?
Right. Well, I actually think we should go full out and go for a Crown grant, because that's really what we want. So I've drafted a motion, which folks are welcome to weigh in on. So, motion that staff initiate a formal referral to the Squamish Nation regarding the protection of DL 1313, and that Flinroe and BCTS be notified that we have initiated this referral, and that a letter to the minister be prepared and brought to a Q2 Planning and Development Committee meeting for further direction, requesting that provisions of the Land Act be utilized to temporarily address drinking water protection and stormwater management concerns until such time as a management plan involving the Squamish Nation can be established, and that staff continue to work with the province and First Nations to find better tools and approaches to protect and manage our watersheds.
And that the town of Gibsons be invited to collaborate in the process?
This is where I'm sort of puzzled, because we are us. The town of Gibsons is part of the SERD, but we're also separate. And it's confusing. So I was actually hoping for a little staff direction on that one.
Okay. Do staff have your motion, Director McMahon?
They have a version of it. I have slightly rewritten it on the fly.
Okay. I'm going to turn to GM Hall before I ask for a seconder on it, to ask for his input on this. Does it make sense from a staff perspective? Is there anything that we should be adding to this before I ask for somebody to second Director McMahon's motion?
Thank you for the question. Staff believe that the motion as worded is clear and don't have any technical input. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Kroll, are you seconding the motion?
I will certainly second it, and I would just like to add something. Director McMahon and I both sit on the Climate Caucus, and they have created a BC chapter of the Climate Caucus. And I would suggest that this also be copied to the Climate Caucus, because we're probably not the only area that's dealing with the issue. And, if we can help others solve problems, I would certainly recommend that.
Director Pratt?
I think we also need to make sure that we're adding our MLA into this. Yeah, we don't have, that wasn't in Director McMahon's motion, and probably our MP as well, because there are some federal implications here at the end of the day. And I would like to see the town of Gibsons be added in or invited in. I'd like that last little bit. Technically, we haven't seconded anything yet, so.
Well, Director Kroll said that he would be happy to second it, but he didn't actually.
He hasn't actually.
Formally seconded it. So.
And to follow Robert's Rules of Order, it's not until the chair actually recognizes a seconder. So, and the chair hasn't recognized a seconder yet. So we're still editing a motion that's being moved. So just making a couple of suggestions before it's fully seconded.
So further to Director McMahon's motion, and that the town of Gibsons be invited to participate, to collaborate on the process, and that, Director McMahon, go ahead.
Well, under my first and that, we said that Flinroe and BCTS be notified, but we could go Flinroe, BCTS, our MLA, be notified, and then, and our MP, fine. And then you had added another and that the town of Gibsons be invited to collaborate in this process. And I think we've got a motion.
And you've moved that motion.
Should we see if our recording secretary is still alive?
I'm actually going to ask Director McMahon to forward her motion to the recording secretary directly. And I see a seconder for that. Thank you, Director Kroll.
I second that as amended.
as wordsmithed?
As presented.
Thank you. Okay. Do I have any other directors wishing to speak to the motion that is now on the floor? No? Okay, then I'll, this is voting A, B, D, E, and F, rural planning. So I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Is there anything further that we want to do with Annex B, or have we pretty much wrapped it all up? Director McMahon, this is your area, this is your fight, if you will. You're good? Okay. It is 10:27. I did suggest before the meeting started that we take a break about 10:30. So I'm suggesting that we take a 13-minute break and come back at 10:40. All right? 13 minutes. I'm being generous today, Director Hiltz. So, all right. We'll see you shortly. And welcome back to the Planning and Development Committee for Thursday, February 17th. Next up in our agenda is Annex C, zoning amendment bylaw number 310.192 2020 for 2284 Pixton, consideration of third reading and adoption. Before I ask staff for their introduction, I would like to acknowledge that some members of the community, including residents in the neighborhood where this application is, have expressed their opposition to the proposed bylaw amendment. In addition to attending the public hearing, many of these community members have also written to staff or directors in the last 3 days to further express their opposition. Fortunately, these letters did not introduce new information in the post-public hearing period. These writers state that they're not being heard, while at the same time, the record of the public hearing with their names on it is moving forward to this committee today. We are actively in the process of considering what was heard at the hearing. As an elected official and a member of the board, which is the head of the organization, I want to be absolutely clear that as a respectful workplace, the Sunshine Coast Regional District does not tolerate personal attacks on staff or comments that are intended to defame, belittle, or call into question character or credentials. This is the same boundary that I stated and committed to as the delegated chair for the public hearing. Speaking more broadly than this one application, we ask our planning staff to balance individual, local area, and broader community interests in forming their advice, which are presented in the form of staff recommendations. As directors, we need to consider a wide range of factors, of which neighborhood sentiment and staff's advice are just a couple. A for and against or popularity count is not the sole deciding factor, and since comments made in a planning process may not be purely for or against, the board confirmed last September that we do not want staff to enumerate comments as was sometimes done in the past. We can, and often do, attend the hearings ourselves and read the hearing minutes. On behalf of the committee, I'll go on record as saying that we have faith in and appreciate the work of our staff. Where we as an organization have made procedural errors, we own them, address them, and if needed, will hold a second public hearing. We're committed to following good process, as is the case here. In closing, there's a respectful, civil way to express a position on an idea or proposal. Share your own feelings or values, ask genuine questions, mention objective facts. The matter here today is giving consideration to development of the community. I'll invite everyone to reflect on how your choice of discourse contributes to the development of our overall community on the Sunshine Coast. And I will ask CAO McKinley to say a couple words as well.
Thank you very much for your words, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity. I also want to say thank you to everyone who's participated in the public hearing process regarding this application. The development approval process in BC is not a perfect process. In 2018, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs conducted an extensive review of development approval processes. They consulted with municipalities across British Columbia to hear their concerns and suggestions for improving the current developmental approval process. The report presented a number of challenges that participants identified as obstacles to an efficient and effective public input process. That public hearings don't allow for discussion, that they occur late in the process, that they attract well-organized interest groups but don't always represent the general public, and they can add to projects' costs and delay timelines. In October of 2021, BC Minister of Municipal Affairs Josie Osborne announced that she was submitting a bill to propose changes to the Local Government Act. If approved, the bill will affect sections related to land use public hearings in British Columbia. So while we don't have control over the process prescribed to us, we have total control over the nature of our interactions. The words we choose and the tone we take in our discourse matters. And I would like to state clearly that as the head administrator at the Sunshine Coast Regional District, I'm committed to ensuring a respectful workplace for staff and the community we serve. As I've stated previously, targeting our staff will never be acceptable. In fact, targeting individual staff members will likely result in people choosing to leave the Sunshine Coast and make it incredibly difficult to replace them. Staff are pleased to engage with community members, whether they're in favor or opposed or on the fence, about ideas, as long as it's done in a respectful way. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, CAO McKinley. Next, I will turn over presentation of Annex C to Mr. Seau, Senior Planner.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides a brief summary of the public hearing held on January the 11th and provides the record of the hearing, including written submissions. As shown in the record of the public hearing, community perceptions varied on how the proposed bylaw impacts infrastructure, transportation, the environment, and the rural character of the area. The proposed size and location limitation of the auxiliary dwelling, as well as prohibition of bed and breakfast use, can help to manage these impacts. Staff recommend the bylaw proceed to third reading and adoption subject to approval from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seau. Directors, any questions, comments?
Before I start pontificating,
Director Ties.
Oh, Director Hiltz. Okay, let him go first.
Director Ties, I will let you defer to Director Hiltz. Go ahead, Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. In the report, there is, and in the public hearing minutes, there was discussion about precedent setting. And so a question I have for staff is, this would be considered spot zoning, and how does spot zoning bind a future board to every application that comes forward and asks for a similar thing? Is there a binding precedent setting, or is it kind of just case by case? And is spot zoning considered a good planning tool? It seems to be applicable to this application. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. What you're referring to as spot zoning is often referred to as site-specific zoning. It's quite commonly a planning tool that's used to consider individual applications. Part of that process is to go through this public process and consider each application for its own individual merits. And by doing so, it doesn't set a precedent that it means that necessarily the one next door may meet the same individual set of site characteristics and merits that would warrant the same consideration. So it does give a high degree of latitude for a consideration on each case. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add too that site-specific zoning amendments are a pretty common thing, at least in the district of Sechelt. I don't know if the town of Gibsons uses them as well, but we were starting to get unwieldy with our number of zones, so we actually moved to just doing site-specific amendments. Director Ties, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. Well, on the mention of site-specific zoning, I think the key to site-specific zoning amendment going through is the general acceptance of the public and the neighborhood around it to that site-specific zoning. And in this case, I don't think that's there. And this area was subdivided back in 2008, 2009, and they were originally 10-acre properties. Some of them were already allowed to go down to 5 acres, and then were limited in the amount of dwellings to retain the same density in order to pay for the refurbishment of the road to bring it up to MOTI standards. It is a MOTI-maintained road, but it is classified as 8F, which is basically unmaintained. But MOTI has indicated that they are willing to upgrade that. And I guess that would have to happen should density continue to increase there. So that's not my chief concern. My chief concern is that most of the community around that area is against this application. And I also want to mention that this OCP amendment was done back in 2008, 2009, which is fairly recent, and most of the applicant and most of the people that are living on Pixton there still reside there, and it's this was a contract with a neighborhood that everybody agreed to get into back then, and I don't think anything substantial other than a housing crisis has changed. And while I do see the need for increasing or making housing more available, I think spot rezoning in a spot where it's not desired and where public transit and such things are not readily accessible is not the way that we want to go about this. So I think if the neighborhood and the community in general was in support of this, more in support of this, I would certainly be willing to reconsider this application, but at this point in time, I would like to make a motion to abandon this application, and yeah, those are my thoughts on this.
Okay, and I see a seconder. Thank you, Director McMahon. Are there any other comments? Director Pratt, I saw your hand first.
Thank you. I respect the director's, Director Tice's comments. I won't be supporting this motion to abandon. I'm acutely aware, being the industry that I work in, of the housing shortage we have on the coast, as well as having assisted with people that have been in need, are homeless. And then reading the posts on Facebook about school teachers that aren't able to find even a one-bedroom suite or a one-bedroom studio on the coast anywhere. And this is a moderate way that we can support additional housing. It's a soft densification. I realize that there is not a lot of support for it in the community. However, we all see the needs that we have in the community, and sometimes taking these soft supports, these soft densifications, they need to be done. We only have a limited amount of, I'm going to say, downtown core. A lot of our area on the Sunshine Coast is rural. We have to look at densification outside of downtown cores. To me, this is not putting us on a slippery slope. This is testing an example of one way that we can provide additional housing, and I need to support that. As a political leader here on the coast, I think we need to look at different options of going forward, and we don't have the same flexibility in the regional areas as what they, or in the rural areas as what they do in the municipalities. The reality is a lot of our areas are not going to be on a bus route, but this is a place where we're restricting the bed and breakfast use, which is one key concern that I did read throughout the report. It's a soft densification. I listened to the public hearing. I believe it's a way forward, and I'm sorry, Director Tice, I won't be supporting your motion.
Thank you, Director Pratt. Director McMahon, I saw you raise your hand there.
Right. I appreciate this conversation because, and I appreciate staff's willingness to take a bit of a risk with this report, because this is an important conversation that we need to have. We do have a housing crisis, and in general, I do support increased densities in the already existing serviced rural areas. However, this area is outside of our water service area, and while it's in our fire protection area, the amount of fire protection available realistically when there's no water service is not the best. And so, yes, we do need what you might call infill. Is this the place? I'm inclined to think not. So I am supporting Director Tice's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Would anybody else like to speak to this? Director Hiltz?
I wish I didn't have to speak to this, is kind of where I am. I read through the majority of the public hearing comments, and what I overwhelmingly saw was, I don't want change, and that an OCP is there to, in concrete terms, make no change possible. And that's not my understanding of an OCP. It's a guiding vision. It's a live, living document. The coast is a live, living place with a huge problem. And that was the site-specific zoning is, I think there's controls in here that could limit the impact into the neighborhood. Sure, I'd like to have no change in my neighborhood, but change is happening, and change is happening on the coast. So I'm supportive of staff's recommendation. And, understanding, we had the former, or the alternate director from Roberts Creek speak of something that this is happening to us all. This growth is happening to us all. Staff says it's coming. You can't pull up the drawbridge. You can't, people want to come here. And so I am supportive of the staff recommendations, and reluctantly having to vote against an area director is not something that I want to do. But in the interest of the Sunshine Coast, that's my job as an informed decision maker. It has to be the whole coast, and this is one teeny tiny little piece of the whole coast, and I think it's a good idea. It's a balanced approach. It looks after the riparian areas, their setbacks, the water issues, Vancouver Coastal Health, and the septic, and I have to rely on those people. So that's kind of where I'm falling, and I don't like being put in this position. I really don't. But I think it is in the best interest of the Sunshine Coast as a whole. So, yeah. I have a comment about kind of policy, which is separate, but I can deal with that maybe after we deal with the motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Hiltz. Director Lee, I'm glad you volunteered and put your hand up, because I was going to call on you anyways. So your turn.
I think this is one of the most difficult votes that we've had. I am a firm believer in increasing density a certain amount in order to assist with the housing crisis. But not only that, it's assisting with growth of the coast. And if everybody has 5-acre parcels or 10-acre parcels, you can't service them. You can't put water. You can't put buses. It's too far. It's something we struggle with in Area A. And it's a chicken and an egg, what comes first. However, in this particular instance, I'm going to reluctantly vote with the directors, because I am so far from the issue in Pender, and if Director McMahon and Director Ties believe that it's not right, then who am I to say no? So I'm sorry, but that's the way I gotta go. I wish it wasn't that way.
Thank you, Director Lee. Director Pratt.
Thanks. Well, I'll put a couple of questions out there, or comments, because I don't like voting against a director for their area either, and I understand, because I think we've all kind of been put in this position of sometimes you have to go the way that you feel is best, and I hear that. If we're not going to support infill housing for family to live and age at home, I don't know what we're going to do for densification or what we're going to be doing about housing across the coast. To me, it's very soft. It is a spot zone, but we've got we have the limitations in place around the property. It's I think of my own situation with aging parents and what I'm going to be doing with them as we go through significant health crises in our family, and the lack of connection that families have right now on the coast because they can't afford to be here, so they have family members that have to move away. This is a way of supporting a family in staying here, in aging here. I understand the community pushback against this. I get it. Nobody likes to see change, to pick up on Director Hiltz's comments. And I don't like voting against a director either, but at the end of the day, this is a small densification in one area that supports family staying here and supports small growth, and I need to support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Pratt. Director Ties.
Yeah, and I would like to express my appreciation for everybody's comments, and I think Director Pratt and Director Hiltz make some very valid points. I think the key deciding factor for me was that that neighborhood, including the applicant, signed on to something back in 2008 and 2009, and with an expectation that that would be part of the OCP and that would be upheld. And if some more time had passed, or if the applicant, was somebody that had moved to the area and wasn't aware of this basically contract that they had signed on to back then I think I would be very much in favor of this spot rezoning. But I think it would be. I don't think it would be fair to the neighborhood to walk back on this, something that they had signed up for back in the day. Now, I am very much in favor of densification and infill housing, but in the appropriate place and in the appropriate neighborhood. So those are my thoughts, and I appreciate what everybody has brought to the table, and I respect everybody's opinion on this. I guess I believe Director McMahon has seconded it, so Chair, I'll leave it up to you then.
Thank you, Director Ties. We do have a recommendation on the floor that zoning amendment number 310.192 2020 be abandoned. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. Voting A, B, D, E, and F, Rural Planning Service. All those in favor of the recommendation? I have 3 in favor. All those opposed? I have 2 opposed. Would you like those votes recorded?
Yes.
Yes for both of those. That was Director Pratt and Director Hiltz. That is carried. Thank you very much. Director Hiltz, you did have a comment or question about procedure or process.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In the public hearing record, there is a talk about bylaw enforcement action happening on this property, which I don't know anything about. But the question I had for staff, and I've heard it mentioned before, is that there is no policy in terms of, is it possible to have a policy that precludes applications from advancing when there's an active bylaw enforcement action on the property? Because this is something, so is that a possible thing? Because it seems to be the public was quite upset that they're not sure about details in bylaw enforcement, and I think that there might be a policy thing. So I have that's a question to staff. Is that a possibility for the regional district to do?
Thank you. And that was actually a short question conversation that came up during agenda review. So I don't know if GM Hall or CAO McKinley wanted to, or Mr. Jackson. Go ahead.
Thank you for the question. When it comes to applications, bylaw compliance issues are kept as a confidential matter. That being said, if there was direction, there could be investigation into some sort of a policy that would consider a list of criteria as to when an application should potentially proceed if there is a bylaw compliance issue at that time. Obviously, bylaw compliance issues can vary from very minor things to somewhat more major issues. So we could certainly investigate and report back if there's desire to on the type of considerations that we might want to look at if there was to be a board policy. Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up, Director Hiltz, or?
Sure. Yeah, I would be in favor of something of staff reporting back, because as we are told, there's many unauthorized planning and building activities going on the coast, and we seem to be playing catch-up all the time after the fact, and once it's done, it's harder to get ahead of the process once you're behind it. So this would be a way to get out in front of a process. So yeah, I would be in favor of something like this, but listening to other directors as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment. Director Pratt, Mayor Seegers, and I all sit on this Housing Crisis Committee. And, in Gibson's, we're constantly, when similar situations come up, we have the OCP held up as, tablets from the mount that it's cast in stone. And I think, it is a living document. But, right now we have a situation where we need housing now. Town of Gibson's, we just lost our CEO because she couldn't get daycare. And she couldn't get daycare because we can't get daycare people on the coast because they have nowhere to live. Cap College put out an application for one of their courses. They had 32 people sign up. By the time the course started, there was one person showed up because a lot of the people that wanted to take the training couldn't afford to live here. So, I think as municipalities and districts, we're going to have to come to terms with housing because it's not happening fast enough. And we're constantly getting people saying, not in my neighborhood. It's less of an issue in the municipalities, and, everyone's looking at this huge expanse of land. A family of two sitting in the middle of 2.5 or 5 acres. We're looking in the town of Gibson's and doing, infill in 75 by 125 foot lots. It's just really frustrating because what I found as values on the coast, we're rapidly losing because the people who can afford to come in here are drastically changing, I think, the values of communities that, people my age are sort of clinging to. So I think, I know there's funding been, allocated for someone to work on this issue in an an overview capacity, but I don't know how you change people's attitudes towards the necessity, as Director Pratt mentioned, of people trying to, trying to exist, trying to create options for people. The federal and provincial governments are very slow to step in to help with this housing crisis. The amount of rental housing that's being created is, minimal, and most people can't afford it. So I don't know how businesses are going to survive because, living wage is not, apartments in Gibson's that we're renting 8 years ago for $650 are now $2,200. The same apartment. They haven't even been painted. So, how is a working person going to deal with it? And, fortunately, I wasn't in the awkward position of having to vote on this issue. But, as boards and councils, we've really got to get creative on how we're going to find housing for people, because it's just not happening fast enough.
Thank you. Director McMahon, you're next.
Right. I would like to speak to the motion that Director Hiltz hasn't yet made about policies here. The common thread in a lot of these contentious issues that come to the board and also to the APCs is an issue of trust between neighbors. And it's often a question where, due to history in the neighborhood, the people in opposition to an application do not trust the applicant to do the right thing. That's really what it boils down to. And when there is a history of bylaw files on a property, you can see why that issue would come up. So I definitely think we should look at whether there is some policy we can put in place here that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Director Lee, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I don't understand how we could have a policy that says we're never going to make a decision because we've pre-made the decision, and I don't think we.
Oh, sorry, Director Lee. I cut your microphone off.
I don't think it's possible to write a policy like that. I guess he didn't agree with me.
And the music swells.
Yeah. So, but I actually wanted to take this opportunity to think back on how we got where we got and how the vote was made just now. The directors that weren't directly affected insisted it go to a public hearing over other objections. And my hope was when it went to a public hearing that the public would step up and say, yes, this is what we want. A community organization, other people that live in the area. I attended the hearing and I didn't see that, I didn't hear that. So I believe that we as a board had given the community every opportunity to say, yes, we want this. And it didn't happen. So, and I do hearken back on previous votes where the same thing happened because the director didn't want it to happen in that area. And that's just the way this stuff works. So I think we have to feel comfortable we tried our best. Thank you.
And Director Lee, just for clarification, Director Hiltz is referring to some sort of a policy around linking zoning changes, what have you, to bylaw compliance issues that a property may have. So, yeah.
Yes, that's actually what I was referring to because it often happens. People build without a building permit. We don't put them in jail. We have a prescribed resolution, and you're prejudging if there's a bylaw. It's not done. It isn't closed. It isn't finished. So you can't hold the world up for something that isn't a proven fact. That's my thoughts on it.
That's fair, Director Lee. And that was also something that we talked about during the agenda review because how do you balance that? Like, what is that threshold beyond which we won't even look at your application, right? So, Director Ties?
Yeah, thank you. It seems that that Area D seems to be sort of the focal point of properties that apply for things when bylaw infractions are being contemplated at the same time. 1220 Lockyer being the other one currently under consideration, and it makes it awfully difficult to get community support when the surrounding community members are already not happy with what's going on there. And I appreciate that, and I think that in order for for those people that are making these bylaw complaints to feel heard, something needs to be done to link those two things. We can't just ignore it, because that means that they will just become a lot more vocal and a lot more active, and will not even give the application a chance, because they don't feel heard. And so I think there should be some sort of link between those two, and acknowledging bylaw infractions does not mean that, necessarily that an application shouldn't go ahead, but I think they should be acknowledged in the application itself, just so that those people that made those bylaw complaints also feel heard. And I think that's sort of some of the key issues around these last two applications that we've had here in the creek, and people are not feeling heard, and that's sort of the thing I'm hearing loud and clear. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Ties. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I'm going to take a crack at a motion, if that's something simple. That maybe Manager Jackson might be able to help with some language, but basically it would be that staff report back to the board on policy options for linking development applications and bylaw compliance. Something like that. Is that?
Short and sweet.
Well, I'm looking for, it's very short. It's not very sweet, but.
I'll let Jonathan comment as well. I'm wondering if that is the wording, there may be an opportunity to look at this as part of the scope of some of the existing work we're already doing without, say, making a directive that provides something that's time sensitive that causes us to adjust work plans or different things to address it. So I don't know for sure if I might be right there. I'd leave it to the experts, but this might be something we can tackle within some of the work that's already on the work plan.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes, thank you. So as part of our planning enhancement projects that we're gearing up to undertake this year, this could in fact be something that is encapsulated with that scope of work. And certainly if there was a desire to see it done through that mechanism, if it needs further scoping thereafter, we can certainly continue to look at it. But that would be one recommendation from staff, is that we could take it under that umbrella.
Director Hiltz?
Sounds like expert advice that I would take for them, yeah. So you would need some kind of policy resolution to include that in the scope of the policy, or can that just be an operational thing? Yeah, exactly.
Do you need a motion or not? Yeah,
I don't think we do in this case. I think it's close enough in scope that we can just include it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Director Hiltz, for raising that. Okay, moving on. In our agenda package, Annex D, pages 109 through 123, West House Sound Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 640.5 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 310.194 for 2061 Twin Creeks Road. Consideration of first and second readings. And back over to Mr. Sayao.
Thank you, Chair. So this report introduces a zoning and official community plan amendment bylaws to facilitate a proposal to develop a mobile home park and expand existing commercial uses on 2 adjoining parcels in the Williamson's Landing neighborhood in West House Sound. The mobile home park will have 37 manufactured homes to be located on the south half of the northwest triangle of the east parcel. Outdoor green space and parking area for each home will also be provided. On the existing Langdale Heights RV park property, the proposal is to redevelop the existing commercial buildings for expanded commercial uses, including restaurant, golf course, clubhouse, convenience stores, billiard rooms, and a gym. So preliminary planning analysis agency referral, and public consultation indicate that the proposal may be supported and may provide a community benefit of affordable housing as well as tourist, commercial, and recreational opportunities, while strengthening servicing amenity and traffic safety in this area to support more intense development should be considered. Staff recommend the bylaws proceed the first and second readings and a public hearing to be arranged to gather further community input. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seau. Directors, any questions, comments? Director Hiltz, it's your area. I'll let you go first.
Thanks, Chair. Another site-specific zoning, I suppose. I'm supportive of the recommendations. I do have a couple of questions for staff, which probably would not affect my vote, so I'm not sure if we can just go with the questions.
You might as well go with the questions.
Okay.
I don't see any other hands up yet.
Darn. So a couple of the questions are the wastewater system. Would it be less than the 22.7 cubic meter threshold where it becomes a SCRD asset under our current subdivision and control bylaw? I think is where that says we're supposed to do it. So there's a wastewater. And then this parcel is just about 8 kilometers from a responding fire hall. It's outside of the fire protection area, and we do not have a wildfire DPA. So is there any elements that can assist the applicant? Can we compel the applicant to do things like fire smarting, fire protection? So those are kind of the two questions. The APC is looking at the 37 homes in West Howe Sound is a significant development. And the load it would put on the existing infrastructure, roads and things like that. So if staff have any kind of comments of how the growth would affect the community wastewater systems, there's already one for the RV. So would it hit that threshold? And the wildfire protection, the fire smarting. Bunch of questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Hiltz. Who would like to take those? Mr. Seau, I see you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you. For the first question, according to the applicant, the community wastewater treatment plan is going to be designed to not to exceed the 27.7 cubic meter daily flow requirement. So therefore, it will not require the plan to be taken over by SCRD for management. So, and it is currently being designed and for review by Vancouver Coastal Health. With regard to the fire protection, fire smart covenant, yes, it is possible to require the applicant to register a covenant to implement the fire smart program as a condition before adoption of the bylaws. And also with respect to traffic safety, MOTI has reviewed the proposal and generally has no objection to the traffic safety issue, except they require the driveway entrance to be paved before adoption of the bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hiltz, are you good, or any follow-up to that?
One follow-up. The covenant would come after, further in the process, before final adoption. When an applicant's intent is to go underneath the 22.7, that's the theory at this time, and then when you come down to the actual, that it, say, is 30 cubic meters. Can that be a condition of this, that it needs to be, I'm not sure what I'm trying to do, not put a load on the regional district, but in terms of services. Constraining an applicant on the size of their wastewater as a condition of rezoning. That seems like a bit of a wild thought, but thanks. That's the only follow-up.
Thank you. Mr. Seau?
Thank you. So it's possible to impose the condition through an agreement or a covenant before adoption of the bylaw, and I believe that question will be best answered by the applicant, who is also in the audience today. So I think that he may be able to provide a little more input in this one.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just pointed out to me that Lucas Chamberlain, the applicant, is in the attendees list and has raised their hand. So I'm going to allow them to talk, to answer, or to speak to that point.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Yes, so the septic system has already been designed by our engineer, and it has been submitted to VCH. The design at 22.7 limits us to 37 mobile homes. That's where that number comes from. So under our current design, we are limited to the 37 on the property due to the size of the septic system, and the septic system for the existing RV park is a totally independent system, which is also under the threshold. So they are independent of each other.
Thank you very much. And yeah, thank you for answering that question for us. All right. My apologies, Director McMahon, I didn't see your hand.
Right. At some other time, I wouldn't mind pursuing the septic question, because I don't know that it applies to a for-profit business. For instance, Poplar's Trailer Park, or Mobile Home Estates, has their own fairly large septic system which they run. So anyway, what I was going to say is that this seems like a good development to me, even though it is outside the fire service area. It's an existing, long-standing, well-operated business, and it's also proximate to a lot of jobs up at the mill and the and Hillside. So I think this is great, and I'm very happy to see it. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to volunteer myself to chair the public hearing, because I do enjoy chairing public hearings, and I assume that Director Hiltz, as per convention, you'll be the alternate chair for this public hearing. Director Hiltz?
Thanks, Chair Toth, for the opportunity, for your offer, and so I'm happy to move the recommendations as presented with staff. I'll put forth my name as the alternate. Rock, paper, scissors on chairing.
If somebody is really wanting to do it, I'm happy to let them. I enjoy the public hearing process. So.
And I love listening to you at a public hearing. So. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So, Director Hiltz, you're moving the recommendations
Yes.
As presented. Recommendation 5, that Director Toth be delegated as the chair and Director Hiltz be delegated as the alternate chair for the public hearing.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that? I have seconder for that. Thank you very much. This is rural planning, A, B, D, and F. Are there any other questions, comments? No? Then I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex E, Development Variance Permit Application DVP 00080 for 6058 Garden Bay Road. Turn it over to Mr. Copes.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this development variance permit application is to reduce the setbacks and increase the allowable floor area of auxiliary buildings, which will be used in conjunction with auxiliary light industry, to permit the construction of a new boat storage building. The applicant has noted the new building would provide much needed boat storage and would be located outside of the riparian assessment area. Notifications were mailed to neighboring properties and no comments were received. Staff recommend issuance of the permit.
Thank you very much. Having heard staff's introduction of the proposed development variance permit DVP 00080, if there is anyone in the webinar audience wishing to speak to the application, we ask that you raise your hand using the raise hand tool, and I will unmute you in the order of hands raised. When you speak, please give your full name for the record. In order to keep our meeting moving, we ask that you please keep your comments focused and limit them to 3 minutes. Once the committee has heard from all those wishing to speak, we will proceed with a motion and discussion towards a recommendation to the board. So with that, is there anybody in the attendees list who would like to speak to this today? I see one person. I have given you permission to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, do you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, yeah, it's Josh Young. I don't have much to say other than I'm the applicant. And yeah, I've lived in the area for 45 years. We've owned the property. It's my father's property, and it's also a long-term succession planning move for me because I plan on owning it. And a big part of it is I own several commercial fishing vessels, and my off time is in the winter. And there's no facilities available to do my maintenance in the winter, welding, so on, and just to store my own vessels in a dry place. And yeah, that's about it.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments today. And seeing no other hands up, I will now turn to directors. Director Ties.
Yeah, I have nothing against staff recommendations. I just wanted to also, yeah, concur with the applicant that there's very few boat maintenance facilities on the coast, and if we can add a few, that certainly wouldn't hurt.
Thank you. Director Lee, I had seen your hand go up, and it's your area, so I'm going to you anyways. Microphone.
If there's no further questions, I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations as presented on page 124.
All right, and I see a seconder for that, so that is now on the floor. Is there anybody wanting to comment further on the recommendations? If not, I will call the question. A, B, D, E, and F, rural planning. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And thank you to the applicant for being here today. Next up, we have Annex F, pages 131 through 134 in our agenda package, and that is the Community Climate Public Participation Update. And we turn it over to our Manager for Sustainable Development, Raf Shea. Welcome. Unfortunately, you're muted and we can't hear you.
Classic, eh? Thanks, Chair. This report outlines the plan for public participation in 2022 that will inform the development of actions for a concerted effort to address the climate emergency. The SCRD is aware of a large number of citizens with interest in this topic and looks forward to facilitating a meaningful and inclusive dialogue. This is also a key area of focus for the SCRD strategic plan. We're proposing 3 phases of public participation with the community at large. Phase 1 will focus on setting the context. Phase 2 will focus on framing the vision and the focus areas. And finally, phase 3 will focus on completing the action planning. There's a high level of organizational and intergovernmental interplay that will be a focus of attention so that we can ensure congruence in strategic direction and reduce duplication of efforts. We have been very appreciative of having local government staff and First Nation staff involved in the pre-work to this point, and a referral of this report to member municipalities and First Nations with an offer to present to Council is recommended. Staff are happy to take any questions if there's any.
Great. Thank you very much. I see Director McMahon's hand up.
Right. Obviously, very happy to see climate work going forward. I've had a number of questions about this committee asked of me. The community project team. I've heard from both those who were invited, such as Scredo, and those who were not invited and wanted to know why they weren't invited. So my question is, how does this committee work? And because we often have advisory committees and usually the board is roped into this in some fashion. So what kind of a committee and what are the terms of reference and who's involved? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Manager Shea?
Thank you for the question. I believe you're referring to the project team for the adaptation component of the project. So that was established following established best practices with ICLEI Canada as part of the Building Adaptive and Resilient Communities project. So staff from different SCRD divisions and member municipalities, as well as provincial ministries and agencies with service levels that will be impacted by climate change, are helping create this groundwork of information and identifying the impacts of climate change. That information will then go to the community at large and broader stakeholder engagement for validation and initiating the dialogue as part of the action planning moving forward. So that it's a project team to help lay the groundwork.
Thank you. Director McLean.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Director McMahon, because I had similar thoughts in that community engagement in a more structured format is critical to success of some of these plans. And Manager Shea mentioned that some of the best practices from ICLEI. And what I've discovered through some of the workshops that I've done is when you get that citizens committee to really hold local governments account when you are establishing this kind of thing, it holds them to account. It helps the follow-up. It helps keep it on the table moving forward. So I don't want to make a motion or anything, but just thinking about that moving forward, from the staff side, how do we involve more of a committee structure of citizens? And then from the board side, looking to some of those organizations on the Sunshine Coast, who can really be those people to help hold this process accountable? That is really the key to successful implementation of anything along this kind of line.
Good comments. Thank you, Director McLean. I look at phase 2 where it lists fostering dialogue and engagement with the community as perhaps the point when the most amount of community involvement, engagement, however you want to reference it, to take place. Is that sort of the thought from the staff side of things, Manager Shea?
That's correct. And as well as phase 1, we'll be validating assumptions and an overview of the status of where we stand in terms of our current emissions and business as usual trends. And then finally at phase 3, there'll be, again, extensive engagement in the new year.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other hands up. Would anybody like to move the recommendation? This is voting all, so Director Kroll, you're moving it? Okay. And Director McMahon seconding it? Great. I don't see any other hands up, so I'll just call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Shea, for being here with us today. Moving on to Annex G, pages 135 through 138 in the agenda package. Islands Fire Protection. Turn this over to Manager Trite, maybe, if he's with us today. Otherwise, GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. We must be having some technical issues here, but I can speak to this item. So staff were asked to take a look at a directive from last year about fire protection on islands within the regional district. And as noted in the report, and after engaging with experts and looking at practice from other locations, we were able to identify some ways that our existing work plan, particularly around fire smart work driven by our community wildfire protection plan, can be applied to our island communities. And there are noted on the top of page 3 of the report, page 137 of the agenda, a couple of items that staff already have underway and can serve to support fire protection on our islands. Thank you, and we now have our Manager of Protective Services in the meeting with us, and we'd be happy to answer any questions on the report. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Directors, any questions? Director McMahon?
You turned me off again.
Sorry.
I find this a difficult discussion, and would actually like to have some island residents along for it, because what it seems to say is if you can't fight a fire professionally, you shouldn't do anything, and that doesn't seem to be an option. If I were living on an island, I would want to do anything that I could in terms of fire protection and preparation. So, yeah, just feeling like we don't have the right people in the room to have the conversation thoroughly.
Thank you. Director Ties.
Yeah, thank you. I guess my question is at what point and at what community size does creating a new fire protection area make sense? I would assume that Gambier would be the closest to being a candidate for that. And I would think its density is still quite a bit too low to be able to afford such massive infrastructure and costs. So, you know, back in the 1960s, when all you needed was a plot of land and a lean-to with a truck underneath it, that would have worked pretty well. But nowadays, to create a fire protection area, I think would be very difficult. So, yeah, any thoughts on what sort of that threshold could be?
Thank you for the question. With regards to Gambier, even though it is the largest island, there are numerous communities on there that are not connected. And so we wouldn't even be able to have one fire department per se for Gambier Island. You'd probably need 3 or 4 different fire departments. So that breaks it down even farther, creating more of a challenge. I think we're seeing up in the Egmont area that even with that number of homeowners and residents, taxpayers, there's certainly a challenge with funding a fire department. And I think it's 440, 450 homes up there. And we're running into challenges financially with that. So I would think for Gambier Island, it'd be a real challenge to have a recognized fire department supported by the SCRD, which doesn't preclude the residents from taking action on their own. It's just that for us to become involved with a fire department, we would want it done properly as per the playbook, as per WCB regulations and so on. And that, as was mentioned, can get quite expensive.
Thank you. Next up, I have Director McLean.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't have a lot of history on this item, but as my understanding is it's local residents looking to get some kind of funding from the Grant and Aid program to be able to fight fires themselves. So going back to Director McMahon's question, can people just protect their own homes? And I don't want to answer that question, but I think when we look at a local government, at this point, what I'm seeing in the report is that it'd be very difficult for the local government to play a role. But should we stop people from protecting their own homes? And what kind of liability do we incur if we do fund some of that through the Grant and Aid program? That, I think, is the real question that we're looking at here. And I don't know if the fire protection district's really on the table, but should we provide any kind of support to individuals doing that? And what kind of risk does that put us on as an organization? So I think the discussion's at a much higher level than what it should be. Can just people protect their own homes?
You very quickly caught up to the gist of the conversation around this, because yeah, that is essentially the conversation that we've been having at this table and that has come up through the grant and aid process. Director McMahon?
Right, and since the maximum grant and aid is only $5,000, the discussion that's been had several times is what is a reasonable level of risk for the SCRD in providing some extremely minor support to folks on the islands. This, incidentally, in talking to other rural directors in other parts of BC, the problem of fire protection in rural areas is a really, really big one, because exactly what staff just said is that under new regulations about fire departments, it's brutally expensive to try and run a volunteer fire department. Some of them are actually looking at disbanding because they can't possibly meet the kind of standards that the province is demanding. So, it's part of a bigger problem, and so maybe this is something that we should have a dialogue with Islands Trust, I guess, and residents from the islands about to keep a watch on what other approaches might be looked at elsewhere in BC, and if any solutions are coming out of the backwoods, as it were.
Thank you. GM Hall?
Thank you, Chair. I think if I can affirm that staff are thinking in the same direction. When we were asked to look at this question, we tried to look at it as the bigger question of how can SCRD, using our service areas and our programs, best support fire protection on the islands. And we've identified a couple of things that we can do through our emergency program that seem to be a fit and seem to be quite impactful, and will move us forward. And one of the things that's noted in the report is that by doing some of that work, some of that Fire Smart outreach, as an example, we expect to get a clearer picture of the goals of island communities, which, credit to all of the volunteers who are putting time and effort into developing some basic fire protection efforts. And so if we can get that understanding, there may be further things that we can do. And the one that's noted in the report is some kind of future Fire Smart small grant program that hits the mark for what it is that communities need. And so just to say, I think staff's thinking is very similar to the comments that the last couple of speakers have made. Thank you.
Thank you, GM Hall. Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. Not that it's an island issue, but we had a situation a number of years ago in Gibsons where a new home was, they had applied for a building permit, and one of the things that was noted by the local fire department was the time it would take them to get there. So when the application went forward, the actual, admittedly it's new construction, but they actually put in backup power and sprinkled the house. And the people screamed vehemently at the time about the additional expense, but they did have an incident and the sprinkler system saved their home. So, obviously on a lot of the island places, they're older, but sprinkler technology has changed. It's not as costly, particularly in a private residence. So, I think, it's something that with new construction, it might be an option to strongly recommend.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
I remember that we had a speaker from Fire Smart BC here a while ago, and in the course of the presentation, he admitted that the current Fire Smart program was designed for the interior and is not appropriate to our coastal climatic zone. And he noted that there is a push on to develop material that is appropriate for this area. So I was just wondering if Mr. Trite would know if there's any progress on that front, because we do need, appropriate material. Thanks.
Thank you. No, I believe that is being developed. And I wouldn't go that far to say that the existing information is not valid for the coast. I mean, certainly every climate area has its own challenges, but I'd say the basic principles of clearing back the vegetation, of screening in openings, there's all sorts of things I think that would apply universally, even though, I mean, obviously it's unique climate on the coast compared to the interior up north. But the fire smart assessments that we are going to be doing throughout the SCRD, including on the island communities, I think will provide valuable information to the owners of what they can do. It won't be, you're correct, it's not specific to the coastal climate, but I still think it'd be extremely beneficial. And maybe just on the topic of the sprinklers, when we talk about sprinklers, there's sort of two different sides to that. One is the structural ones that we see as we see in this building here, and the other one are the ones that mount on the outside of your house. And those are the ones that can deal with an approaching wildfire that you can activate to water down your home, prevent embers from burning on the roof, and to create humidity in the area to slow the spread of wildfire. And those can be added onto a house rather inexpensively. Probably for a couple $100, you can get sprinklers and the required hoses and mounts and so on, which will take a significant step towards offering protection to that structure.
Thank you. Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. So, Director McLean very succinctly put everything all together there. But just to give a little bit more context to what kind of what the islands look like from makeup is, we don't just have the old cabins. We have $2 and $3 million homes, or $2 or $3 million cabins that have been redeveloped there. There's an extensive amount of investment that's gone in. I think of North Thormanby alone, all of the different jurisdictions between Vaucroft and Upper Thormanby on the cliff, and you've got everything from 10-acre parcels down to waterfront lots that are fading into the ocean because of water and climate. And so we're looking at a variety of issues on each one of the islands, and I know the fire protection for them is really key. I would like to see us speaking more with them and giving us a better idea of what they're, what kinds of things they're looking at. I don't know if the sprinkler system would be able to work for all of them because because water is as much of an issue there as it is here. And water storage is really the key one that keeps on coming up, especially through the grant and aid process. And as we've seen, and as Director McLean has said, I think one of the big concerns really happens for them in the summer. As dry as it gets here, you think about, a lot of our islands, yes, they do have a lot of rocky expanse, but there's a lot of trees. And one of the most popular areas on the coast to visit during the summer is Thormanby, and you land at a grass beach. And there's a significant amount of very dry grass there in the summer. I've been there in July, and it's been tinder dry. And those are the things that really concern, because there's homes there right at the edge of the grass park, and if a fire were to happen, it's a lot of homes that are going to go up there. So however we can support, I understand we have a lot of risk. We've asked staff to look into this before, and that I'm still struggling with this, and I know Director Hiltz is too. It's that, what's the risk to our organization, and but I think it's really important that we do have more Islander voice conversation, especially with the directors, so we understand what they're dealing with there. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Pratt. I will encourage my remaining speakers to keep their remarks shorter than that last comment. since we do still have some agenda to get through. So, Director Hiltz?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, staff, for putting the report together, because I think it summarizes and kind of shows us what box we live in. The question I have, it would be around the potential timing of the small community grant program from the Fire Smart. Would that be like a budget proposal in the upcoming budget? Is that kind of how that initiative would progress? And if you have any, it's preliminary, but it would take some time to develop that. So this year or next year, is it in staff's plans of where that would come, where the initiative would come for that grant program? Thanks.
Thank you for the question. It's not in the 2022 work plan, and I think there's, as a number of directors have commented, I think there's information intelligence that would benefit the design of a program like that, that we can gain through the work that is in the 2022 work plan. So I would suggest that a 2023 budget proposal for a new program could be a consideration. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Lee?
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be short. On page 137, it says as next steps, and there's two suggestions there that seem like pretty good suggestions to me. Do we need to do something here if we would like the next steps to happen?
Those are already identified by staff as part of their work plan.
They're in the work plan for 2022?
Yes, that's right. It could have been worded as will rather than can for clarity. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Director McMahon.
Just wondering if there is a potential role for Islands Trust here, since they do have a planning function in relation to the islands. Just, can we rope them into doing something here?
That's a good question. I mean, I assume that Islands Trust will be involved in the fire smarting work that's being contemplated in for 2022. But I'll look over to the staff table to see if there's a head nod or affirmation of that.
Well, it's an interesting question, in part because staff understand that the official community plan for the local trust area is due to be worked on. And so how fire protection fits into that vision is an interesting interface. But certainly opportunities for collaboration or coordination can be looked at. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon, did you have a follow-up? Your hand is still up. Okay. All right. Seeing no additional hands, we will move on to Annex H, Municipal Finance Authority Loan Authorization for Fire Department Apparatus Replacement, and turn this over to CFO Pedro.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this one here is for housekeeping purposes, in the sense where we want to execute the loan authorization with the Municipal Finance Authority. As part of this particular project, there was an amendment to the budget, and so we didn't reflect that in the required wording for MFA to execute the loan. So that is the purpose of this particular report here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Strictly a housekeeping item. Director McMahon?
Yes, I would like to move the recommendations on page 139.
And I see a second. Muted myself, and I see a seconder for that. So this is voting EF and Town of Gibsons. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex I, RFP 2122202-01, SCRD Volunteer Firefighters Health Benefits Contract Award. Turn this over to Manager Trite.
Thank you, Chair. So bring this forward with the recommendations that the report titled, as you stated, Volunteer Firefighter Benefits Award for Hub International Insurance Brokers be received for information, that a contract for the SCRD Volunteer Firefighter Benefits be awarded to Hub International Insurance Brokers for up to $186,860 plus GST, and that the delegated authorities be authorized to execute the contract.
Thank you very much. Voting A, B, D, E, F in Town of Gibsons. Director Ties.
Thank you. My question is, I see on page 142 the the amounts allotted to each department, and I'm guessing each fire service will be carrying their own costs. Is that correct? Okay, thanks.
Just to confirm that was. Just to confirm that there was a head nod from the staff table. I had one question because it wasn't identified in here how this contract related to the amounts that we'd put in our budget. And I believe we squeaked in just under the budgeted amount. I think it was less than $1,000 difference. So, yeah. Director McMahon.
Right. I was just wondering what the term of the contract is.
The initial contract will be for 1 year, and then with the option to renew after that, after we have an evaluation, essentially after the first year of how it goes.
Thank you. Director Ties?
Yeah, thank you. My question is regarding new memberships and the membership growing. Is there contingency in the budgeting that's taken care of, or would we have to keep amending the contract and such things for those matters?
Good question.
There's no additional money available with the current budget for this. So we would have, if the numbers increased or if there were more families than singles, overall, we would have to seek additional funds for that.
Okay. Thank you. Directors, would anybody like to move some recommendations? Director Kroll?
I'll move the recommendation as presented.
Thank you. And I have a seconder for that. And I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. Again, A, B, D, E, F, and Town of Gibson's. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Annex J, Planning and Development Department 2021 fourth quarter / year-end report. Over to GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. So every quarter, staff prepare a summary report on activities for the department, and we have that here for you today. And staff will do their best to answer any questions emerging from the information presented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will turn to my directors if there are any questions. I was astonished at the increase in building permit activity and revenue in the fourth quarter of 2021. Much of it up in Area A, interestingly. So, directors, any questions? Director Ties.
Yeah, thank you. I think as key performance indicators goes, I would appreciate the addition of an average response time as part of the reports, to see how, if there's a backlog, how big the backlog is, and whether it's improving, not improving, or so I think that would be a good key performance indicator to have in those quarterly reports. I don't know if staff has any response time comments at this point in time.
All right. I don't see anybody over there reaching for a microphone, so I think I don't know. GM Hall?
Well, I can't outbluff you, Chair. Staff hear the interest. There may be some areas where, because of new software approaches that we've put in to improve customer service and efficiency, recognizing that many of our service areas have seen massive increases in demand. From that software, we may be able to generate response time comments going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. I could see there being some challenges in that, depending on how, complete applications are coming forward, or how long a builder or developer might take in responding to a request for additional information, and I'm concerned that could, drag down that average unfairly, especially if we're waiting for another party. Director Hiltz?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's a question about the work done without permits. Staff are working on it. Would you say that staff are gaining ground on this topic, I guess, is the success in this direction? Thanks.
Well, we only know what we know. So, it's the tip of the iceberg. All of our service areas, planning, building, and bylaw are working in close coordination and generate fairly good success in voluntary compliance for those issues that we become aware of. And I'll say that we're, with credit to all of the staff in those areas, we're holding the line on approval times for most of our permit types, which makes it easier for people to do the right thing. Yeah, but there's, yeah, it's an ongoing effort, and we continue to strive for that voluntary compliance to resolve issues. Thanks.
Go ahead, Director Hill.
Yeah, just a follow-up. The tip of the iceberg, only what we know. So staff still rely on public input then? That's one of the key, is that a key way that the enforcement people learn about these things? So encouraging people to submit to info at SCRD and the bylaw enforcement, is that, we still need to keep that word going? You can't do it alone. You need other eyes out there is what you need. Thanks.
Yes, that's certainly helpful. Obviously, our priority is safety. So if people become aware of safety issues, we appreciate them being brought to our attention. Thanks.
Thank you, GM Hall. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I was just going to comment briefly on the increase in callouts for the fire departments. That's pretty dramatic. And I guess we'll just have to keep an eye on it over the next year or two to see how it goes. But that has some implications. That's a lot of extra workload for the volunteer firefighters.
All right, thank you. I don't see any other hands up, so I will move on. Thank you to staff for putting that together, and always a good insight. I'm going to look at Annex K, L, and M together. Those are all APC minutes. Now, we didn't identify any specific action items in there, but I don't know if there's anything that directors wanted to raise. I see nobody raising their hand. So, okay, we have no communications this month. We have no items of new business. We do have an in-camera session. And so I'm going to read this out, and then I've got to further end that to tack on to the end of it. So I look for a motion that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with Section 92B of the Community Charter. The consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality and a provincial government or the federal government or both, or between a provincial government or the federal government or both and a third party. And further, that Director McLean be included in the in-camera session. So I look for somebody to move that and second that. All those in favor? Thank you. So before we close this to the public, are there anybody in the attendees that wanted to or had any questions for us today? And otherwise, I think we'll take 5 minutes just to refill our drinks and make sure that everybody's in the meeting that's supposed to be in the meeting. So we'll see you at 12:15.
If so, how long will it be?
Dean's
Can I
nodding
do
his
it by
head
the
over
pool?
Well, we've technically got some extra time because the other meeting doesn't start till 2, so if everyone's cool with it, we'll just launch into the lunch and learn when we wrap up here.
We've, IT's brought us back live, so thank you very much, IT. Welcome back, everybody. And nothing further on our agenda, so I look for a motion to adjourn the regular Planning and Development Committee meeting. Moved, seconded, all those in favor? Thank you very much. And we'll see you all later.
Okay, can you let me know what time that other one is going to be starting then?
Yes. Director Pratt, you have a question?
Yes, it's, I had a question pop up via text. So, yeah. So it's in regards to Director Hiltz and GM Hall and I were all copied on an email from one of the islands, from Shirley Higginson, regarding rainwater storage for environmental purposes. Because of course it's the piece again about coming up in rural grant and aid, and just asking for some clarity around. Sorry, I had to find the email and bring everything up here, so I'm just looking for the actual question. So the SCRD for the last couple of years has been approving the use of a rebate to mainlanders for tanks for rainwater storage purposes, and don't seem to have any trouble doing so. The rebate program is again currently available to mainlanders. So the question is why can we do this for rainwater, but we can't do this for water storage for fire protection? And I think we've had a version of this before, but it's popped up again. So I think it's fair to put it out there.
Go ahead.
Thanks for the question. Based on the information I have at hand, and others here may be able to add to this, I understand that the rainwater harvesting rebate program is for those who are properties that are part of a regional water service, and it's there as a water conservation measure. And so that's the reason why that program is not available to those in most, if not all, of our island communities. And could we have a future rainwater harvesting program for islands as part of some service? Yes, I believe so. But at this time, for a number of reasons, it's not a fit through grant and aid. And the reasons there would be that that program does generally not support capital, nor does it support fire safety or life safety equipment per the existing policy. Yeah. And as we talked about in the meeting, the possibility of a future program around Fire Smart administered through our emergency program is something that can be given a look down the line. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. No other burning questions that have come in by email while we were closed? All right, then thank you everybody, and we'll see you at the next meeting.